You're listening to Groundbreaking, where consulting meets innovation. Welcome back to Groundbreaking, where consulting meets innovation. My name is Jad Sobh.
And I'm Peter Nabhan.
If you're tuning in for the first time, Peter and I work for ECS Group of Companies, a nationwide engineering consulting firm. On this episode, we will explore the future of sustainability throughout the stages of construction and how to excite young engineers with sustainability. Joining us to share their expertise are Austin Wallace and Richie Stever.
I'm going to intro you, Austin.
Awesome.
Austin Wallace is the Sustainability Senior Specialist for the American Society of Healthcare Engineering, ASHE, which is part of the American Hospital Association in Chicago. In his role, he supports initiatives in environmental sustainability, energy efficiency, and advocacy with a focus on the healthcare sector. Austin also has experience in the nonprofit sector. So prior to joining ASHE, he was a vice chairman for an environmental organization focused on climate action and advancing sustainable future. Austin holds a Bachelor's of Art degree in Sustainability and Political Science and a Master's in Art and Sustainable Development. Austin is also a Graduate Certificate in Leadership and Public Management and a Certified Facility Professional, SFP. He's passionate about the intersection of public health, sustainability, and environmental well-being. I'm happy to have you here today with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you, guys.
I'll get Richie. Richie Stever is the Vice President of Real Estate and Construction at the University of Maryland Medical System, UMMS, managing operations across 12 hospitals, including real estate, construction, and property management, and sustainability initiatives. He holds a Master's in Healthcare Administration and is a senior member of the American Society for Healthcare Engineers, ASHE. Richie has received the Facility Executive of the Year Award and recognition from Building Operating Management Magazine. Richie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks again both for joining us today. Obviously, we hear sustainability being thrown out in a lot of conversation. And what we want to do, or what we're hoping to do today, is to make sure that our listeners or the general public can understand how sustainability impacts the operation and how sustainability can also affect people in our industry, which is the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, or AEC industry. So I want to start, I was hoping to get a good definition from you. Like, how do you understand or how do you define sustainability in what we call the built environment? Obviously, most of our podcast is going to be a conversation. So I was hoping to see if you can share some of that with us, please.
Austin, you want to go first?
You betcha. Yeah.
Right.
Let me pull up Merriam-Webster. No, I'm just kidding. I think just going back to my days when I was studying sustainability, and it was very clear pretty often how many definitions there are when it comes to sustainability. I mean, I think if you Google it, you can get 103 or 106 individual definitions. And the one that I typically, revert back to the most is from the Brundtland Report back in 1987. Meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same. That is probably the most blanket level that I think covers the most industries. I'm writing an article right now for Healthcare Facilities Management magazine about how to integrate sustainability with project management. And in one of those topics, it's clear that there's different applications in every one of these sustainable initiatives. Commercial real estate thinks of sustainability differently, the way a small grassroots organization would. And that carries over even into healthcare when we look at different departments. How are facilities using their resources effectively and efficiently compared to our nursing staff and our clinicians and our anesthetic gases and our EVS teams? Each group a little bit differently. And I think that's really the fun part of sustainability, is uncovering what it means to you and your teams. So to answer that question, there's a lot of definitions, and I guess it's up to your own interpretation, but that bare bones framework is using your resources effectively and efficiently.
That's an excellent way to put it, Austin. I like how you talked about, not sacrificing the needs of a future generation. And that gives a very good, broad level. That's why I want to tie it back to Richie. Richie, for you as a practitioner and leader in your field for the system up in Maryland, How has sustainability been adopted and how has it shifted over the years throughout your entire real estate life cycle?
Yeah, great question, Peter. So very similar to the way it's been adopted at your own home, right? So while I manage 12 million square feet total, what I try to do is simplify all of that into a single dwelling, and namely my house, especially when I'm talking to people who are not familiar with the work that we do and try to grasp how we're managing our building. So, when I think about sustainability, the term sustainability, I think about how are we managing waste, meaning trash? How are we managing energy? How are we buying energy? Are we polluting the environment with the products that we're using, like natural gas and other things? Are we being fiscally responsible, right? So you can make decisions that benefit one way and hurt financially. So again, I try to simplify it down to the home. And as you can imagine, the home environment has changed since we were all younger. The way that we build houses are different. The way we operate our HVAC equipment, as an example. So many of us have programmable thermostats versus the old thermostats were set it and forget it, and we're just keeping a steady temperature. Incandescent light bulbs for a long time, and we've since switched to LEDs. We weren't segregating our trash. We were just throwing everything into one bin, and the bin goes out to the curb, and who knows where it goes. Now we're segregating it at our own house, all with the benefit of improving the environment so that it's here to stay for generations to come, as Austin pointed out. I'm concerned, I don't have grandkids yet, but I am concerned about them. I'm sure it's coming soon. But I am concerned about them when they get here and then their offspring, what the environment looks like for them. Certainly trying to do our part, both at the residential level and at the commercial level and even industrial level, to help improve the environment, make it better than it was.
Which is Richie, appreciate you sharing that. That's a good way to simplify how people can understand it, and a big shift from maybe 20, 30 years ago where it was just build, and let's see how much we can sprawl out how much we can develop as a species. And now we're more mindful of this is going to be something that can impact generations in the future. And I think now, to your point, a lot of people are just implementing a process in their whole, even land acquisition. When they look at acquisition, they try to develop a site that maybe was an infill as opposed to a greenfield. When we do construction, there's product selection. And obviously on your side with the operation as well, you've taken on some steps. And I was hoping maybe you can share a little bit about that. What are some of the key things you focus on to be more sustainable with your land acquisition or your real estate acquisition? And then some on the construction side and maybe an operation. And then Austin, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, so on the land acquisition side, certainly we have opportunity in all areas, just in acquisition. As you know, we're not making any more land. It's either develop on previously undeveloped land, such as farmland, which then has its own challenges with bringing utilities out to those sites. Sometimes it could be from some distance. And then the other end of the spectrum is building on top of something that was already there. And so many of the times we're talking about a brownfield site. The worst type of site is where there were hazardous materials formerly on the site, such as a gas station or some kind of milling plant or a steel plant, as a matter of course. And so naturally what we want to do is clean up the environment the best we can so that whatever was in the ground does not have negative impacts to the future occupants, particularly if we're building on old space or on an old site. And then this whole concept of sustainability with renew, reuse, and recycle. So we're doing the same thing with land, right? Why overlook a piece of property that formerly had a gas station on it when with a couple measures we can make it safe for the next people? So that's how we look at land there. So I'm going to say no land is off limits, because there are ways to address each type of land, no matter what it presents as you're doing your due diligence. But then as we begin constructing, let's say vertically, the type of concrete that we use, does it have fly ash in it? That's a recycled product that we can use while maintaining the structural requirements Then what does the building envelope look like? How insulated is the exterior building? Austin's in Chicago. I'm in Maryland. He's building a little different than I am, but we're both worried about the heat and the cold just the same, right? So keep the heat in where we need it in and out where we need it out. And same thing with the cold. We're really concerned about the building envelope, the walls, the floor, and the ceiling. Matter of fact, I'm building a 412,000 square foot warehouse right now. It's an industrial park, and I was really concerned about insulating the slab. So the first 15 feet from the edge of the building in, we insulated the ground so that the cold wouldn't permeate through the concrete. And so these are the things we're thinking about as we're building the building, not just the walls and the roof, but what does the foundation look like? So really exciting point in time as it relates to building construction and building opportunities to improve the environment. And so I'm really glad that you guys asked me to join this podcast and talk about these wonderful things.
No, of course. We appreciate you being on and just sharing your experience. And I know you're someone who's implemented a large sustainability program from basically nothing to full functionality. And I think that's very admirable. So I appreciate you sharing your experience with us.
Absolutely.
And then for you, Austin, just to tie back to you maybe deal with like macro, you work with systems across the nations. You guys do consulting for systems in California all the way up to New York and down in Florida. So you see a lot of variability. How have you seen some of these practices actually come into play and come into fruition?
It's interesting to see everybody's take on it, and every organization does it a little bit differently, just with regards to how much staff and personnel and how much time and how much resources they have to dedicate to looking at potential opportunities, new products, how to incorporate that and tie it in with stakeholders and get staff engagement. And I was actually at a conference last year out in DC, and we were talking about building envelope. And a really cool technology that I have known about, but I hadn't seen it used in that application before, was using thermal imaging on drones. And they would fly it around a building that they were concerned had thermal leaks. I mean, we think of flying drones around, in our free time. It's a fun pastime, but having real world applications like that to be able to identify savings in your buildings was such a eye-opening experience for me. I was like, there's so much more that we can be doing, are discovering, and seeing folk across the country really get behind tackling inefficiencies and locating that savings, especially in healthcare, because that savings goes a long way on the back end and reinvesting it back into patient care. It's such a really neat thing to see folks do.
Interesting that you bring up savings there, Austin, because that's one of the things that it seems to be talked about fairly often is sustainability is expensive. Is that true? And how do we kind of sort through the fact and fiction when it comes to what is the cost of sustainability?
I feel like a lot of folks see sustainability as a plus on their price tag of a new asset or on a building upgrade. And while that may be true in upfront costs, having a greener alternative or a sustainable boiler or chiller to be installed, I think it really recoups that savings in the long-term cost of management for that asset or for that building. You might be spending a little bit more on upfront. You're going to be spending that same amount, probably more, if you were to go with the unsustainable, ungreen option, just based on maintenance costs and getting folks in to your space. And just think about how many times you have to take that asset out of commission to do this. So it's saving time, it's saving money, and all that. It's really hard to calculate that, but there are some life cycle cost analysis of tools out there. And that is one way that we've seen folks really sell that idea that sustainability doesn't have to be expensive. And it's really makes financial sense when you look at it, the long-term cost, because a lot of these systems and a lot of these assets have boilers and chillers that will be there for 60 years.
Richie, do you have any, what are your thoughts on that?
Jump all over that one. So I totally agree with Austin. There's this stigma about sustainability costing more money. Sometimes you find it upfront in the capital expense. Sometimes you don't, right? But we do know for sure in the life cycle cost analysis that there's certain a lot of reductions. Back to the residential for a moment. So I bought a new house, or new to me, about 3 years ago. And I called the utility company to find out what the average utility bill on this house, doing my due diligence, of course, right? And they told me a number and I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, that's how much somebody's paying to run this house. And I looked at my significant other. I told her, I'm like, we're not going to pay that. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, I see opportunities already in this property. So as an example, the kitchen refrigerator, the freezer section was -5 degrees below zero. And so I made it positive 5 degrees. So still frozen, right? I turned up the refrigerator from, they had it at 32 degrees. I put it on 40 degrees. I added the programmable thermostats. So I set the timing so that it adjusts for when we're not there. The filters were dirty. I changed the filters. The coils were dirty on the air conditioning units. I cleaned those. House came with a hot tub. They had the hot tub running 24 hours a day. According to the literature, it only needs to run twice a day for filtration or to maintain temperature. I changed all the light bulbs from incandescence and fluorescence to LEDs. That was a little bit expensive to do that, but one-time cost. What else did I do? Had an old freezer, just a backup freezer that looked like it from 1980. I'm sure it was not Energy Star certified, so I actually got rid of that one completely. Didn't need it. The moral of the story is I've reduced my energy costs for that house by 50% with a little bit of time investment and a little bit of capital investment. Now, on top of that, a year ago, I added solar panels to the property, and so 70% of my power I'm generating on the roof. I wanted to hold the solar panels aside on the conversation because most people, that's where they go first. But as you can see, I didn't go to the solar panels first. I made the building and I keep residential to commercial. I keep changing that in my head. So I made the house as efficient as I could. And then that told me how much solar panel I needed. And then I purchased solar panels based on the most efficient building that I had. Other things we talked about: envelope, do the doors seal properly. I added some weather stripping. Do all the windows close properly? Are they the appropriate windows? Yes, they were all double pane windows, which was good. I don't know if they're argon filled or not, to be honest with you, but I do know I have a good envelope, so the bones were there. So again, it doesn't have to cost a lot up front to make significant changes. Now, move that into the commercial realm and to the healthcare field. As we're building buildings, we can make selections that are environmentally friendly and don't cost a lot of money. As an example, if we're thinking about carbon emissions and the use of steam and natural gas, do we have to put in steam humidification? No, we don't. We can put in adiabatic humidification, which is cold water, not hot water, or not steam. And you're getting the same performance without using natural gas in your system. Takes a little bit of adjustment to the air handler to add that type of technology, but it's thinking about things a little bit differently than you had in the past. And that goes for building owners as well as engineers. We can't design the way we used to design. It just doesn't work, right? We have to consider new products, consider new practices, like Austin talked about, using the drone, using spray foam versus regular insulation, other things like that to make our buildings that much more energy efficient. Again, starting with the bones and then doing the add-ons later.
Your experience with your home reminds me a lot of growing up with two brothers, and my mom's always yelling, "Shut the door, we're not trying to cool the whole neighborhood."
Right?
Simple mindset shift. And the older I get,
Exactly.
I see those utility bills, it starts starting to resonate, and I'm getting it now.
You know what the problem is, Austin? No, people don't operate in their work environment the same way they operate in their home environment, right?
Very true.
So how many times do we walk out of a room and leave the light on in the conference room or in the bathroom, right? Whereas at home, mom and dad sitting on our shoulders saying, "You better turn that light off, boy."
Exactly.
It definitely needs a more of an ownership type piece, and just continuing to build those small habits. Like, yeah, this is basically like your home. And sometimes make it easy for them to build the habits. Like my light is automatic. When I walk out the room, if there's no movement detected, shuts off. And it sounds like, what you're describing is kind of a twofold misconception of sustainability being expensive. First one is people just think very short term, it's going to cost me X plus, and how am I going to recoup that? Number one, nobody's looking at any type of return on investment. And then what you mentioned, Richie, the second piece of it is like, it's going to be a little bit more work, but that work is something I can recoup almost immediately. And that's where the a lot of the disinformation is coming from.
And to help overcome some of that, I grew up hearing the term many hands make light work. And that holds true even today in this realm of sustainability. If you can share that load of being sustainable and having that mindset and going into a room and looking for something as simple as lights being left on. And it really does take a village. And we've seen some incredible examples of organizations really instill that organizational mindset through the use of their green teams, or all it takes is one person to be conscientious. And sometimes you have to be a little bit pushy, but it ends up working out well, and it saves folks time, it saves folks money, and it's really, really cool to see.
So this brings up an interesting point, right? So we've talked about, there's might be that little bit of that upfront cost that's associated with doing this. So let's play out a little scenario here. You're going up the chain to try to gain, support from the executives where you're at on this new project that's going to, require some of this. How do you route that conversation? How do you pitch that to them that this is something that we need to do for the long-term benefits? Is it just as simple as that? Do you have to put a little bit more into it? What does that look like?
So I'll take this first. So as you can imagine, in my position, that happens a lot, right? As vice president of real estate and construction, I have to either make that decision or take it up to a higher level for a decision, especially if a lot of capital is involved. So my first stab at it is to look at, what does the code say? What are you required to do? Here in Maryland, we have a green building code. So we have to follow the green building code. So how do we do that? And if what the design team is not presenting that doesn't meet the green building code, that's the easy one, right? Then also then my next step is to look at tea leaves. So there's a lot of potential new legislation coming through at various state levels. Maryland's pretty progressive, so we are seeing those type of legislations out there, pieces of legislation that cause us to consider our carbon emissions as an example. So how are we building to what they're about to approve or what they've approved just recently? And so that's how I start there. And then if there's a really outside of the box thinking and the codes or legislation don't really apply, then that's when I start doing life cycle cost analysis and doing comparisons. If we go this route, the traditional route, or we go to a little bit fancier route, what does that look like from a first cost? And then what does that look like from a life cycle cost? And then present it that way. So I'll give you an example. We're considering some geothermal on a new construction project, and doing our due diligence again, we're trying to figure out, what is there a first cost increase moving to geothermal? So we know geothermal, and we have to put in a lot of wells, and that means a lot of pipe and a lot of drilling. What is that expense? And then consider, what don't you need to install if you go to geothermal? So if we put in geothermal, do we need cooling towers anymore to release the heat? Probably not, because we're dropping the heat in the earth, right? Do we need a gas line anymore to the building? Probably not, because we're not heating water with gas anymore. We're using the earth's heat to do that. If we are putting cooling towers in, where will we put it? Are there structural reductions that we can take, like all the steel and all the footers, etc.? What about generators and redundant power? Because we're now redundant through the earth, do we need more generation, like combined heat and power unit as an example? So we do the pluses and minuses on both sides, because there's some negatives on this side, traditional, and there's some positives. Certainly, I'm talking about financial, right? Not environmental. We already know the environmental. Talking about financial, what does it look like comparison to comparison? Comparing each section. And we're finding that there's no additional first costs by going with geothermal package as compared to a traditional package. As a matter of fact, the geothermal package is much simpler to operate. So it makes it easier long-term on the staff. And then you layer on all the energy savings on top of that and the environmental reductions on top of that. And then the question becomes, why aren't we doing it? Right.
I think moving into, if I could tag on there, I think when you're approaching your executive leadership with new project ideas, one of the things that I've talked to folks that have experienced it pretty intimately, one of the things that they've said is the most beneficial for them is going in with terms and explaining in terms that will resonate with them. In the engineering realm, I'm not an engineer by trade, and so this really hits home for me, is everyone talks in kilowatt hours, BTUs, everything. And I'm like, I have no idea what this means. What is it? If I can conceptualize it and hold it in my hand, what is that? And our chief financial officers, our chief executive officers, our entire executive leadership suite, they juggle a lot of things. And so coming and approaching that conversation in terms that they can grasp and understand and just pick up and run with, they've experienced a lot more beneficial conversations when it comes to new projects. And Richie, I know that's definitely something that I wanted to get your perspective on. Is that something that you have thought about or gone into meetings like that?
Yeah, Austin, you actually, it's imperative that you speak the audience's language. CFO wants to know in healthcare, how does this affect patient days? How does this affect our capital budget? How does this affect our operating budget? Right? Those are the things that they really care about. If I told them it saves 2 million kBTU, they're like, okay, what the hell is that? But if I save us $10,000 a month perpetually, then their ears are perked up and they understood what I said. Back to Austin's nailed it on the head. We can't use engineering terms to talk to lay people. We have to, no pun intended, but we have to dumb it down, right? And we have to make it digestible for those that we're speaking to, especially those that we're seeking approval from.
Yeah, you make a very solid points there. So it sounds like that combination of it's a new practice, so maybe some of the initial cost is going to be a little bit higher, but it's also a lot of times we're not really doing the appropriate calculation and the right communication or the right median to tell the executive suite that this is actually going to save you money, even if you invest now. But this is how it looks like in simple terms they can understand, and this is how it financially looks like for our budgets, pro formas, so on and so forth. So it actually becomes way easier to pitch it that way and get backing.
So I do want to say many of the executives want to be pioneers, but they don't want to be first. So as you're pitching a new idea for a new thing, it's helpful to say, even if it's a different industry, we want to incorporate this idea into our project. Here's why, and here's who's done it successfully before. Could be aviation, it could be industry, it could be other than, in our case, healthcare, but they're really afraid of being first because, and you have to imagine why, it's because people's lives are at stake. We can't afford to put in something that doesn't work, right? Because in our particular case, people die, right? And we don't want people dying on our watch. And so that's why I say just be cautious. If you're bringing a new idea, do a little research, figure out where it's been done successfully before, and provide that research to the people you're talking to. And that should ease some of their concerns, especially if it's something novel.
And have a redundancy plan built in. That's
You always have redundancy.
Thing I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, you always have your best alternative offer. I appreciate you saying that, Richie, because a lot of people don't think of the stakes in the built environment for healthcare, because it's not just financial business risk, it's also human life. So it makes sense for them to move slower than maybe other industries, especially in adoption of new technology. I did want to use this to build upon. And so we looked at what is sustainability. We talked about some of the maybe misconceptions or some of the implementation. And I think we want to touch a little bit about the future. We're sitting with two experts in sustainability, and we know that the workforce is shifting. it's been a kind of a shift. It's like a lot of young people come up to us and say, what is the company doing about sustainability, or what is the company's vision? So that's something organizations are paying attention to. So I want to start with you, Austin, because I know that sustainability is your life. You live this every single day throughout your work. What are you seeing some systems doing, and how are they actually implementing sustainability with an eye on the future and the workforce?
I think there's two key arguments or situations within that. Looking at healthcare facilities specifically, I want to say the large percent of our workforce is nearing retirement. And I know a lot of organizations are really stressed on how they're going to get new young professionals that have that experience and intimate knowledge of the facilities that they're in. There's so much ingrained and legacy knowledge that go into these facilities. There's folks that have been there and spent 50 years in one building, and they know it better than any other person. And it's like, how can you replace it? How can you teach that? And that's something that's keeping a lot of hospital executives up at night, and people that are directors and managers and trying to figure out how to bring people in. And sustainability could really be that avenue. I know that was something that I was passionate in coming out of school. Was I want to be a part of an organization and a team that really values and cares about efficiency and cares about people and cares about health. And ASHI and AHA was really the perfect blend of all of that. But in addition, when we're looking at specific organizations and hospitals, these young people are coming out of school and they're eager. They really are. And so finding ways that could be through tech schools or trade associations or some sort of job shadowing programs. These are all ways that organizations can really get their foot in the door with some of these students. I even saw an example at a conference I was at a couple of years ago. Was they were going in high schools and doing high school job shadows, like really plucking these kids from an early age and showing them that, hey, this is something that you can do, that we are going to have a need for, and so you can have a lifelong career in one organization, in one building. But I mean, it can take you anywhere. It was really cool to see.
Peter, I'll jump on that. So, yeah, I agree with recruiting and retaining talent is a big concern, but also recognize through my partnerships in ASHI and being able to talk to facilities folks across the U.S., many of us are doing sustainability work. Where I think the problem is we're not good storytellers. We're not good in promoting the great work that we're doing with the way we're building new buildings or maintaining old buildings. And so I would say to anybody entering this workforce or considering entering this workforce, ask some probing questions in the interview process to figure out what they're doing. Do you guys have motion sensors in your building? How often do you change your air filters? Do you have any daylight harvesting in your space? I guarantee the interviewers are going to be like, yeah, we have that. Just because it's very similar to at the house, right? It's just ingrained in how we operate today that we don't even think of it as being sustainable. It's just a regular course of business. But if you're entering the workforce and joining us in the healthcare arena, I can assure you that we're doing it. We're just not talking about it. And once you start asking those probing questions, that'll tell you whether that's the type of organization you want to join. And or if they're not doing it today, certainly a whole bunch of easy apples to pluck right off the tree, and you come in swooping in with some real easy ideas and making big change real fast and making a name for yourselves. I do think there's some benefit there. Certainly could use new ideas, could use new talent, and certainly welcome you in my organization as well as any other organization that ASHI represents across the United States. So I would not let that hold you back. If you're passionate about sustainability, I'd let that shine through, because many times a facilities organization or the organizations in healthcare are already looking for that type of talent. And two, I think you'll find a lot of personal satisfaction in the work that we do in healthcare arena. I often say in construction, there's like 4 types of buildings to build out of the ground, and that's kind of easy and kind of boring. But when you add the healthcare component to it, where we have lead in the walls and medical gases run through the space, and the heating, air conditioning requirements, both temperature, humidity, as well as pressure, and you add all that up, it makes for a very complex building. And once you start building these complex buildings, you're not going to want to build anything else because it's so exciting. And then you tie in the patient, that I'm keeping those patients alive. I'm serving my community. I'm making my community a better place because of that space I just built over there. You can't replace that.
I couldn't agree anymore, Richie. That was a good way to describe it. Appreciate you saying that. And of course, we're not gonna end the episode without talking about the big elephant in the room, and that's artificial intelligence. So we can now use machine learning models, big data, to do so many predictions, and that could definitely play a big role in sustainability efforts and definitely advancing this whole sustainability industry. I'm going to start with you, Austin, first. What kind of conversations are being had around AI and the role that AI has in advancing sustainability?
I think the first thing that jumps out in the healthcare space, at least in the conversations that I've been a part of with concerns and opportunities within AI, is the security of the data that you put into that. There's a lot of open source, and once you put in data, who has access to that? Is that being generated in the future with new reports that someone pulls? And so I know there's a lot of closed loop systems, and those have been used for ton of stuff that saves time, saves money. You don't have to have a one whole FTE dedicated to running this data or doing this analysis. You can put that data in. And so in terms of sustainability, that checks every box except for the whole side of how much energy data centers are using. That's a whole nother beast and can of worms. It's way above my pay grade to open, but it's definitely conversations that we've been having and that we've been hearing our members have. And it's just something, like Richie said earlier, of no one wants to be the first, but we have to be all a part of that conversation in order to utilize an amazing technology that could make our lives 10 times easier. It could help the efficiency and the patient experience in the hospital and shorten their length of stay, which in reality, as much as we love and care for patients, we don't want them in the doors. We don't want them to be sick or injured in the first place. And so the best we can do with our jobs is to help mitigate them needing to be there in the first place. And how that relates to AI, it's a whole other question, but it's a valuable piece of technology that I think we're still figuring out.
Absolutely. And I definitely heard to your point, I definitely heard a lot about companies using patient data as opposed to reactive management to make sure that the patient remains healthy throughout their life. So they're doing, data collections, predictive analysis to make sure that, you catch things early as part of the overall healthcare value chain. Richie, what are some of the immediate impacts on your operation for AI, and maybe what are some of the first things you would probably use AI to help you with?
As I think about AI and the built environment, both building and maintaining that environment, two things come to mind. One is the building automation systems. So there are many software organizations out there that provide predictive analysis, fault detection analysis that sit on top of the typical building automation system that pick up anomalies that a human wouldn't normally pick up. That's one thing I think about how AI is improving our environment and our work practices. And then second, with personal performance and time management for myself, think that it's just going to improve the way we perform and streamline our communications. One thing I do want to bring up as it relates to new technology. So when DoorDash, as an example, or the grocery, I don't do these things, but the grocery ordering platforms where it came out, it says, oh, that's going to reduce the number of cashiers in the grocery store. What I'm finding is actually more staff in the grocery store now picking people's groceries up and delivering them to their car than there ever were the number of cashiers. So just look at what technology is doing at the grocery store, where you thought, or somebody could have easily thought, that self-checkouts and delivery to your car is going to reduce the number of staff. I'm actually seeing the opposite in the field, which is very uplifting because many people are concerned about the adoption of technology and how it affects job creation and employment. And I think we're adapting to it. And if anything, it's providing more opportunities than less.
Absolutely. One thing that I always heard when I first started attending healthcare or ASHI conferences, like, we're asked to do more with less. and having a tool that allows you to do more, enables your humans or your individuals to do more. That's what AI is doing immediately. And I think that's helped us so much. And there's absolutely to your point, there's really no danger about being replaced with AI. The only danger is being replaced by another person using AI as opposed to you not using AI.
Exactly.
And sorry, Austin, by the way.
No, you're
Back
good.
to you.
It actually piggybacks really well with that. I mean, I think AI this just jumped out to me in my brain was AI is almost like the bumpers when you're bowling. It helps steer you and keeps you in the right direction. And it allows for that creative freedom or the speed in which you're throwing that bowling ball to head towards the end goal and the pins. And so, AI could really be a neat tool that I'm excited to see how we are able to put it to use in hospital facilities.
I like your bowling analogy. That was great. I don't want a gutter ball.
Exactly.
Did you ask AI, by the way, for that, Austin?
No, but I should have. I'm excited I wonder what they would have come up with.
That's true.
Well, gentlemen, I would like to send a thank you to both of you for all the insight today. It's been an awesome conversation because it's, when we had originally met, it was like one of those things like, how many different directions can we go? And I feel like we've done an awesome job today with the two of your help, kind of giving our listeners a little bit of a good picture of what sustainability is and how it can be implemented and all the different things that are affecting it. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for your leadership.
So we typically end these with one question that we ask of everybody that comes on the podcast, or we try to, at least. Richie, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us something in your life that has been groundbreaking? And this is personal or professional. And groundbreaking is actually the title of the podcast.
So, as I think about that question, what for me was groundbreaking, I go back to COVID. And during COVID, I was asked by my hospital leadership through a series of events to create a mass vaccination site for the state of Maryland. And I had the opportunity to build a mass vaccination site in M&T Bank Stadium. We operated it for 4 months straight. We gave 250,000 shots. We were up to 1,100 shots an hour. And I feel like professionally, I don't know how I'm going to overcome that experience there, the ability to design and operate and run that vac site and what it did for the entire state of Maryland. We turned the state of Maryland around by standing that vac site up. And so for me, that was groundbreaking because nobody was doing it, doing mass vaccinations. Matter of fact, we wrote a playbook and one of my partners and Ashley borrowed it to stand up their mass vaccination site in Texas. And so to me, that's groundbreaking. I hope I get another opportunity to do something that amazing. But if I don't, I'm happy.
Richie, you just gave me the chills, considering I drive by the M&T Stadium quite often. So now it's going to be, every time I'm going to drive there, I'm gonna have that image in my mind.
I have the image in my mind every time I drive by. Like, yeah, I even have season tickets there, and it walked right through the clubhouse where the site was. I can see it in my brain, all the lanes, with all the people coming through, getting shots, happy as hell when they're done and feeling rejuvenated and not scared anymore. I mean, it was really amazing.
Absolutely, and just the sheer amount of impact that you've had. And truthfully, when you talked about storytelling, this sounds like a story worth telling. Maybe it becomes a book one day.
Austin, what you got that's been groundbreaking?
In my recent life, what's been groundbreaking for me is probably getting Ben Johnson as the head coach for the Chicago Bears. I am very, very excited to have no excuse this next year on scoring points. But in my professional life, I think what's been groundbreaking within the past year has been my ability to go and speak and travel has really opened a lot of doors professionally and personally to meet some, fantastic individuals that are doing some really cool stuff in their organizations. And that's how Peter and I originally met too, and is getting the chance to meet. And it's really opened a lot of doors in the way that I think, in the way that I approach sustainability, in the way that I think how it gets applied in organizations, and then the impact that it's having on patients. It's having an impact on staff that use that space in the buildings, and then sustainability more broadly, and how we're using how we're disposing of our waste, how we're using our resources. And so I'd say that's what's been groundbreaking for me is having those relationships and those connections with people that I really want to be a lot like one day.
Just like the name of the podcast, that's some groundbreaking stuff right there, gentlemen. So to our listeners, we hope that you've enjoyed this episode on sustainability in the built environment, and stay tuned for more episodes with thought leaders just like Richie and Austin. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you for listening to Groundbreaking, where consulting meets innovation.
This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Nothing herein shall be construed as providing professional engineering services or used to establish the standard of care. This podcast and the comments contained therein represent only the personal views of the participants and do not reflect those of ECS. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors.